Welcome back to another episode of Inviting Shift. If you have experienced changes in your body over time that maybe you never desired or even thought you would have to manage, today's conversation is for you. Pey Carter is a guest today, and she has a book coming up called My Body's Not Your Dartboard. Pey has managed to make this transition from an able-bodied person to a disabled person, and she talks today about how we can go about accepting our body, really starting to learn to love our body again, even when it changes in ways that we don't want. Pey gives us some really great tips and ways that we can manage our changing physicality and how we can embrace that a little bit more. Well, welcome, Pey, to the Inviting Shift podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me. Really glad to be here.
Yeah. So as I said in the introduction, you have a memoir coming out next year, and it's called My Body's Not Your Dartboard, and it's all about your journey through what you've been going through. So tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. So I have quite a few unique disabilities, and I didn't have them from birth, except for one that I didn't know about. But I went into the military and I experienced military sexual trauma, which caused PTSD. So for a very long time, that is what I primarily dealt with was PTSD, which for me is not a physical disability. Obviously, some people consider it a mental disability, and I do have 100% rating from the VA just for PTSD. So I started off with that and developing lots of coping mechanisms, like a lot of people do with mental illnesses, which included things like hiking and walking a lot. I had a service dog. I made a lot of progress. And then what happened was I got shingles at the age of 29, believe it
Mm.
or not. So it's a very young age to get shingles. And it caused conditions that affected me physically. So I went from having PTSD and still being very physically able-bodied, to almost overnight becoming very physically disabled. All of those coping mechanisms that I had for my PTSD went straight out of the window.
Mm.
So as you can imagine, that was very difficult to deal with at the age of 29, which I consider young.
Yes.
So my memoir is about that experience, going from being able-bodied to disabled, physically disabled, within a matter of months. And just my journey through that, how I processed it. I now actually have multiple chronic illnesses. I developed more over time went on, and which of course is very difficult because you make progress and all of a sudden your world is kind of turned upside down a little bit more. Um, but just talking about that experience, that how it affected the way that I parent, how it affected my relationships with other people, and then how I finally came to a point where I came to terms with my body, my bodily limitations. I didn't fight it anymore. I came to terms with it and really started to appreciate the lessons that my body has taught me.
Mm.
So that's basically sums up what my memoir is about.
Yeah, those are great challenges. And I know a lot of us face them. I mean, even naturally as we get older, right? Parts of our body
Hmm.
stops working. And for it to happen so young for you, what a way to learn by fire, I guess, is like how we can embrace these new areas. And I'm wondering what part of acceptance had to come in, because I think for me, I had some gut issues and that would take me out for 2 months at a time. I'd be in bed, and the cycle of what happened in my head was, I'm a bad parent because I'm laying in my bed and I should be up. I should be doing this. Like all of those, like I can really feel that struggle of how do I adapt to this, to this life where I have to work in new ways. I have to live in new ways.
I definitely dealt in those early stages. I definitely felt a lot of shame. So the shingles caused issues. It damaged my autonomic system. So your autonomic system is all the things that your body does automatically without you thinking about, right? Like you're blinking, you're swallowing, you're breathing, etc. You don't think about that. And that also includes things like temperature control, right? What your body does when you get too hot and too cold. Or, when you've been sitting for a while and that blood is pooling, when you stand up, your body automatically starts, pumping that blood all the right places. Well, all of a sudden, I couldn't do that. I couldn't walk across a room or stand up without getting dizzy or passing out because my body no longer could regulate my heart rate and my blood pressure when I changed positions. So part of that was not only, all right, all my coping mechanisms are out the window. I am really frustrated that I can't even do like laundry, but also I can't even tie my son's shoes, right? My son was at an age where he's still learning how to tie his shoes. Same with my daughter, they were very young. And then in the midst of getting treated for those two conditions, I found out that I have a tissue connectivity disorder, and my daughter has it as well. So I felt a lot of guilt with that because she has to take a lot of precautions. It's very preventative care right now. So there's a lot of things that she really, really loved to do that she was doing for a long time that all of a sudden she couldn't do either, right? And so I'm not feeling wasn't just feeling like the guilt and kind of shame of, all right, now I can't properly take care of my kids at that time. Of course, obviously, like I learned how to better manage my conditions further on, but I also felt the guilt of, all right, I have just passed this condition on to my daughter and completely wrecked the things that she enjoys doing. So it was very difficult. And I think even now, as things have progressed, I was able to process that. I really enjoy doing things like my daughter constantly asks me, like every time she changes grades and, has new people in her class to come and talk about this condition that we share and why she needs accommodations when she doesn't look like she needs accommodations.
And I think that can be really hard for people that have a disability in the world, right? Is that it's almost like you feel like you have to clarify it all the time. I'm wondering how that feels for you to be like, yeah, actually, I do need this handicap sticker or I do need this accommodation
Mhm.
because this actually is very important to me. And how do you manage that, or how have you been managing that in the world?
Well, for a long time, those first few like difficult years, actually, going like I said, from able-bodied to disabled, it was very hard for me to accept the accommodations that I need, right? Because I was stubborn and I was trying to find a treatment to fix me, right? So I could be that person that I was
Just back to
before.
100%.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, so I didn't want to take any accommodations. It didn't matter, how it was affecting me negatively. I just thought, all right, if I push myself, things will get better. And of
Mm,
course, when you do that and you have conditions, it has the
makes
opposite
it
effect.
worse. Makes it so much
Yeah.
worse.
And so it just came to a point where it's like, all right, I need these accommodations. I don't like that I need accommodations, but I need these accommodations. And of course, with having multiple invisible disabilities that affect me physically and are considered rare or uncommon, it's difficult to navigate that,
Mm,
right? Especially in those times where you are struggling to deal with it yourself. So, for example, so I use during the summer, I often use a walker.
mm,
Along with that, having trouble regulate my heart rate and blood pressure, my body can't regulate temperature. Like my internal thermostat is broken, so I don't sweat during the summer. I often don't know that I'm overheating. Same thing with winter right now, right? Everybody's body, when they start getting too cold, your body kind of pulls in that heat to protect your core. Mine will send it to wherever it wants, my fingers, my toes, all the places. So, as you can imagine, living in the Midwest, right, where we have those very different
sure.
seasons, right, it's very difficult. It's so that's actually, despite having physical pain, right? That's actually the primary reason why I have disability plates is because my body struggles from, say, being in an air conditioned car, right? Driving around town, being in an air conditioned car, going out into 90-degree plus humidity, then going into an air conditioned store. My body can't handle those changes. And so I would pass out
Mm.
or just get so dizzy that I couldn't even do like the shopping that I was there to do in the first place. So that way I was really stubborn about, but then you realize, oh wow, I really need this. It's very beneficial. And of course, right, being looking young and looking able-bodied. And when I use my walker, it's not because I need trouble, like I have trouble walking. It's because it has a seat. And then that way, if I get dizzy,
Mm.
I can sit down, right? I'm not like
Mm-hmm.
dropping to the floor, which then causes more problems because, going from sitting and then trying to stand up again will make me dizzy. So I don't look like I need to use a walker. I look like I'm faking it, right? Or if I'm not using a mobility aid, I'm just hopping out of the car, right? So people think often that I'm borrowing like my grandpa's vehicle, right?
Right.
Because I want to park closer to the store for convenience. So there are times when I have people come up to me and ask me why I'm parked there. Or I've even had people take pictures. It's very, very strange. But what I've come to find doing, I've spent the last couple of years really doing advocacy work. For a long time, I was doing it mostly on PTSD and military sexual trauma. Then I became disabled. And after I really started processing that, I started doing a lot of advocacy work. So I speak in a lot of different, various situations to different groups of people. And what I've come to find really at the base of, this ableism and ableist language that people do. So, for example, coming up to me when I'm parked in the disabled spot, or one time I was at a fair using my walker and I looked at a table and I looked back and somebody had put their trash in my walker. I've had it kicked while being in the line, like over the last couple of years. And what I've come to find is the bottom of this is fear
Mm.
because disability, as you mentioned earlier about bodies breaking down, it's a biological fact, right?
Mm.
The chances of going to your grave and having no medical issues whatsoever, I haven't heard of anybody being that lucky, right?
Not a long life anyway.
Yeah, no, not a long life, where people are in their 90s and they have zero, or
Right.
80s, 90s, and they have zero medical issues. It's just some people's bodies break down sooner, right? Like some people are born and they have disabilities. Some people develop them as they go on, but it's this fear because that's what we represent, right? Disabled people represent like, oh my gosh, at some point I'm going to be disabled,
I may not be as
uh,
abled as I am now. Right.
right? And I
Exactly.
mean, people go in and out of it, right? You can be temporarily disabled,
Mm-hmm.
but I feel like it's fear is the basis of
Mm.
that. It's people with disabilities are seen, as living this tragic life of pain that needs to be rehabilitated or
Mm.
fixed.
Put
And
some
so
kind of
it's
happy
difficult.
sticker on it.
Yeah, yeah. And when I go and do these talks, and I always have a Q&A afterwards, I had this woman once, admit that she was trying to process the fact that she had this belief that she or wish that all when she went out in public, say to a restaurant, that all disabled people would just be in a corner, so she wouldn't have to look at them because it made her feel uncomfortable.
Mm.
And so sitting with people in that, all right, why? Why does that make you uncomfortable? Um, and so I really understanding that people aren't intentionally most of the time, right, trying to come at you, but more that they're coming from a place of fear or,
Mm.
it really changes how you kind of process things.
Mm-hmm.
Does it validate what they're doing? Of course not. But when you kind of get a better understanding of that, it definitely helps me process.
Mm. Beautiful. So, not to change the subject just a little bit, but what is your take on using disabled person versus person with a disability?
So when I was, first of all, I'm going to say neither phrase is wrong in my opinion, right?
Beautiful.
People have the right to refer to themselves how they want to refer to themselves. When I was really struggling, right, in that transitional period, I was very adamant about using person with disability because I didn't want to be seen, right, as my medical issues.
Mm,
And I would get really upset when I heard somebody saying disabled person that like wasn't part of the disabled community. I would get really upset. And then as time went on and I processed it and I really paid attention to how disabled people are treated in society and talking to other people in the community, I realized like, why do I need to separate myself from that identity? I
mm,
have people, people with disabilities have others that try to invalidate their experiences
mm,
constantly, right? And so there's a lot of people that claim that to say, I'm a disabled person because I am disabled, right? If that makes sense. So I now say disabled person because it's like, yes, I am disabled and there's nothing wrong with that, right? That's
mm.
a huge part of my identity and I'm proud of it, right? But there's other people that do want it separately. So
Yeah, identities are very unique to each of us, I think. And I think that we have to also, there's a balance to how we claim these identities, which ones of them are helpful and which ones aren't. I love how you've like reframed it in your head. It's almost like I used to, one of my identities when I was growing up was that I was a big old bitch. But now that I'm older, I can look back and go, wow, what a gift that is, right? Like, of course, I don't want to use it all the time. That's not the point. But what, we can honor these bits of ourselves. It's almost honoring. Identities can also be honoring if we can claim all of the gold that comes with it, as well as the not so great parts as well. So I've been hearing a lot about how it has been for you to go from an able-bodied to a disabled body, and how that really took a lot of acceptance. I'm wondering what else it took.
a lot of self-discovery and learning,
Mm,
I think, because one of the gifts, one of the lessons that my body has taught me is how to slow down and listen to it,
mm,
right? Because as a society, especially in the US, right, we are able-bodied people are expected to work themselves to the bone, right? Typical people that aren't in the disability community or just have any chronic illnesses, they're expected to work themselves to the bone, right? That 8 to 5, a lot of people
at
work more than
least.
40 hours. Yeah, more than 40 hours, pushing themselves, right? Because they need to earn all the money, right? We have a society that's very capitalistic and is like you need this electronic, you need this car, you need this house, or if you're not doing this, you're not doing enough, right? It's this worth is equal to productivity.
Hmm.
And so people just push themselves in too far and they don't listen to their body. What I found is your body will give you signals,
Oh,
right? It will
yes.
give you signals when you are doing too
And
much,
if you don't listen
right?
to those, there'll be bigger signals coming.
Yeah, exactly. So headaches, poor sleep, right?
Hmm.
Typical people do experience this, and it's like, all right, let's just pop some Tylenol, or I'll take a mini nap, etc. They don't say, all right, hey, my body is saying this. I need to slow down and take care of myself. So that's one of the things that I've learned because I know when I get really stressed, it'll affect me physically. I'll get nauseous, I'll have stomach pains. And it's like, all right, my body is telling me it's had too much. I need to rest. I need to take care of myself and really come to terms and understand that self-care isn't selfish.
Hmm.
I think that's another thing our society, pushes is one, you need to work yourself to the bone, and two, if you try to take any time or care for yourself, right, that's an inconvenience. When in reality, that's what we need.
Yes,
We
yes.
need to practice self-care.
Yeah, if we would
to
all take care of ourselves, we would all show up better. And I love how you're saying this because this was exactly my journey. It's like you're speaking it is like in my 20s, I used to get migraines. So what did I do? I popped a pill, right? And then I had huge inflammation in all of my joints. So what I do? I popped a pill. And then I had gut issues that would keep me in bed for like months. And this was all stress induced, trying to keep up. I was a single mother for a while, so I felt like I had to work the two jobs so I didn't have to go on welfare. But then I never got to see my kid. I was like taking him from daycare to babysitter and then not seeing him. And all of that had a huge impact on my body. And doctors used to be like, it's all in your head. And I used to be so mad because I was like, it's not in my head. But years later, after going to health coaching school and doing all kinds of things to figure out what is going on for me, it was really about slowing down and being more mindful in my life about the amount of stress that I was taking on because we act like it's some kind of huge honor that we can, oh, I can just handle it. I can just handle it, right? And we just keep handling
Mhm.
it and taking it on and going, oh, I can do that too. I can do that too. And then at some point, our body goes, no, you can't because you know you're not a damn robot. Like this is a human body that needs to be taken care of. There's a lot of maintenance that goes with it. There's a lot of really, and what you're, and to your point is like starting to slow down and ask myself, how am I feeling? What do I, oh, noticing stress in my body for the first time, like noticing the emotions that were going on and dealing with them rather than just pushing through. Because I was like you, I was like, surely if I just get the right answer, the right pill, this is all just going to go away. And I'm going to be able to go back to being my capitalistic, productive American self. That didn't work, by the way. Beautiful. So you've mentioned on social media that your body has taught you a few important lessons. And can you share some of those? How can people, and this is, even though we know that all, at some point, we're all going to become disabled if we're so blessed to live so long, at some point, right? There's going to be something that goes wrong with us. So I think it'd be really great to like some of these lessons that we're teaching is I heard one of them is slowing down, tuning in, right? And going, what is it that I actually need today rather than what do I want to get done? Because that used to be my question. And I make a big list and then I'd go freaking nuts because because there was no way I was getting that list done feeling the way I was.
So another one that my body has taught me is the importance of healthy boundaries
Mm,
with myself and with other people. There's what I say is a lot of internal ableism sometimes, right? Like I should be able to do all this, right? Maybe if I can't do all of this, it's a me problem, right? That I'm not listening, that I should be able to and I'm not, and I'm making up reasons, etc. So, with friends and family, being able to say, excuse me, no, I really can't do this right now, right? And instead of being pressured into it, saying, no, I really can't. I need to put my body first. Like, do you want me to be there suffering, or do you want me to rest, take care of myself, and maybe do this at a later time? Kind of that same of the yes, 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 right? People ask you out, people ask you to go do things, family asks you to come over, or family tries to come over without, checking in and, saying, no, no, I can't do that. No, I'm like 3 days out of surgery. I can't do this right now. It doesn't matter if you're just stopping by to say hello. I can't.
mm,
Uh, and like I said before, I would really just be like, okay, all right, like maybe I'm just being a big inconvenience or a bad friend, along those lines, right? But saying no, no, it's valid, right? It's valid
self
that
care is
I don't
valid.
do this. Yeah, just saying like it doesn't even have to be a self-care situation, but just saying I can't do this,
Hmm.
no, right? And really sticking to that. And then also just, having those boundaries like self-care within yourself and with your body too. All right, this is my limitation. I know
Mm.
this is my limitation, right? I need to not get there, be close to there and not over, because then I'm not having a healthy boundary with myself as well.
Yes. And I mean, I think, yeah, boundaries with other people are still self care. Like it's all about how I care for myself, right? And I think that that's really super important to understand. And sometimes, at least for me, when I was going through my health issues, the hardest part was convincing myself it was okay. Like it was okay that I wasn't going to get the whole list done today. It is okay that, that I can't go, watch my son's game, even though I really want to. It's okay. And I think that we can really think that if we don't get all the things, that somehow we're failing. And I think that the journey is learning how to live within these limitations of being human, which is, sometimes getting disabilities or and I'm sure what I wanted to hear about too is there's a lot of people that don't look at mental struggles as much, like PTSD. For some people, they're just like, what is that? You're just sad about something. And I think that that can be really hard for, I know that a lot of my clients have some of these things going on for them, and it can feel really hard for them, like you said, to draw boundaries with people and be like, no, I don't want to go do that thing because I'm not comfortable with that. And then they look at it as if it's the person's being fearful instead of actually being realistic in their abilities, which can be very challenging. I don't know if you run into that.
It is definitely difficult when you have a mental disability or mental illness, anything that affects how you operate in the world, and
Mm.
especially just being neurodivergent. So, for example, when the incident with me that caused my PTSD was in 2004, I was 18. And at the time, PTSD was only for men that were in combat.
Right.
Basically, everything that we've learned in the civilian world about PTSD has come from the military, right? So when that happened, it was, well, PTSD is only for men that's been in combat, and they misdiagnosed me in
For
the
real
military as being
serious things, right? I
right.
mean, they have like a judgment over what's serious and what isn't.
Yeah. Yeah. And so they misdiagnosed me as being bipolar and forced me on up to 4 medications at a time.
Hmm.
When I got out of the military, that bipolar diagnosis was thrown out, and I was diagnosed with PTSD. And at the time, there was no civilian therapist that I found that knew how to deal with PTSD due to military sexual trauma. So I spent a lot of time educating
Hmm.
the therapists that were supposed to be treating me, and I really didn't feel like a veteran, because anytime it came up that I had PTSD and the fact that it wasn't combat, right, or I wasn't male, it was dismissed. I remember going to a VFW, right, because I didn't deploy, but I served, right, when there was military combat action going on. And I served overseas. So I was eligible for VFW, and I remember going in to just try to see about joining and was told, well, what are we supposed to do with a woman?
Hmm. Right.
Or I'm registered with Wounded Warrior Project. And at first when I started going with other veterans, so not associated with WWP, would be like, oh, where did you serve? Oh, you weren't in combat. All right, you don't matter.
Hmm.
Right? And I think in the civilian world too, a lot of people forget that you can get PTSD from any traumatic event, right? You could be in a bad accident, all sorts, you could be abused. There's all sorts of reasons why you can have PTSD, but I think that there's this underlying assumption, right, that if you have PTSD, it's only from being deployed and serving in combat. And
Instead of
later on,
anything traumatic that can, I mean, there's so
right,
much trauma in life that I think that we all could be suffering from little bits of it here and there. But yeah, I find it very interesting because I've never thought of this before until we just started talking about this. But it's like when the men start saying, no, this is a real problem, all of a sudden it becomes a real problem. But like when it's like women or people who have been abused in the past saying it for all those years ahead, it wasn't really believed. But oh, well, we can believe that a man who goes and, is in a war zone could be traumatized, but why would that not be possible for anything else? And just because something didn't traumatize me doesn't mean that it's not going to traumatize someone else going through the same thing. So I love that we're talking a little bit more about opening our minds to just being more kind and understanding to each other about what's going on. Because I think the same thing happens with depression too. People are like, well, just get over it. Put a smile on. Just do
right,
something fun. Like, what is wrong with you?
exactly. And there's a couple of my other conditions, that make me neurodivergent because it affects my neural pathways and how I think. And it's so hard sometimes getting people, especially I've had issues with certain professors when I was in school, trying to get them to understand, even if I had an ADA accommodation letter that explains what my accommodations are, trying to get a professor to understand that because they're so used to, say, somebody that's deaf or blind or has dyslexia or a learning, a specific learning disability or physical disability. And when it's like, hey, I have all these conditions that affect how I think and process, it gets dismissed a lot.
Hmm.
It's very frustrating. And
As
like you
if like you
said,
could just change.
especially,
Sorry. I was just going to say,
no,
yeah, go ahead.
especially when you identify or as female, it gets dismissed a lot. It gets dismissed a lot. When I got shingles and then had the issues that was affecting my body's ability to regulate blood pressure and my heart rate, my doctor sent me to a cardiologist, and my heart is just fine. There's nothing wrong with my heart. It's my brain, right? It's my brain saying, "Oh my gosh, your blood pressure is so low. You're not getting blood. All right, your heart rate is going super high to try to pump this blood when." And when it came back from cardiology that I was just fine, it was put that my doctor's like, "Oh, it must just be anxiety because you have a PTSD diagnosis." Excuse me.
Yeah, well, when I had gut issues, it was kind of the same thing. Oh, none of this stuff is working. You must be depressed. Here, take, like, they just always wanted to hand me depression medication. And so that was a struggle that I had with it, was when I was going through doctors, is that um, I struggled because they always just wanted to give me depression medication. I was like, I wouldn't be depressed if I felt better. That was the struggle. And then my husband goes in, they diagnose him within 3 months. He's got surgery, everything's done, and he's healthy again. And that was very frustrating for me. So I can understand how this would be frustrating for you.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing that people that aren't disabled or, have a chronic illness, right, don't understand. They're used to, say, going to the doctor, all right, you've got the flu, here's your treatment, boom, right, you're done. Whereas people with disabilities, like we often have to go to 3, 4, 5, even 7 doctors to get a proper diagnosis. And it's so difficult too, because especially like for me with having uncommon ones, I have to literally bring medical journals because one of my condition has a comorbidity with most of my other conditions, right? So I have to bring this medical journal to my doctor to say, hey, this is what I'm experiencing, right? I think that I have this, or likely, can we please explore it? And I don't think typical people have to do that,
Mhm.
right? They don't have to come with a medical journal to try to
All
justify
the
why
proof.
you want to be examined for something.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want another diagnosis to my list, but in order to, process things to help with my body, I need to know why. right? Why I'm experiencing this.
Yeah, beautiful. Okay, so some of the lessons, just to recap before we talk about this big, exciting thing that Pey's got going on next year. Some of the recaps was that I heard was one of them was to learn to slow down and tune into that body and really ask yourself what's going on and what you need today. And this, I would say, is for anybody, whether they considered them a person with disability or not. I mean, I think it's the best way to prevent bigger problems from happening is really start tuning into our body and being okay with slowing down, which is a challenge for a lot of us. And I know that we mentioned another one, acceptance, I believe we were talking about, is like having to get to the point where, okay, this is where I am right now. It doesn't mean, like you said, some disabilities can, the effects can fade or come back. So it doesn't mean that's who I always have to be. But right now, it's not going to help me to do anything except accept at least where I am right now. Cool. Anything else you have before we talk about your big exciting thing?
And then just to recap the healthy boundaries as well
Thank
with
you.
yourself
That was
and
a
other
beautiful one.
people.
Yeah, with yourself and other people. And sometimes holding the boundaries with ourselves can be even more challenging than holding boundaries with other people, right? If we know that there's behaviors that we do that are not helping our health situation, holding those boundaries with ourselves, or even holding boundaries to really take care of ourselves. And say no sometimes. I learned about the spoon theory when I was going through
Mm-hmm.
sickness. And if you don't know about the spoon theory, it's as if, like, say you only have 12 spoons in a day and getting dressed and taking a shower takes 4 of them, then you only have 8 spoons left, right? So it's almost like your energy is an exchange, especially when you're not feeling the 100% that you used to feel like you could do all the things. Counting your spoons is really important. Awesome. Well, let's tune into your exciting news. You have a book coming out next year. Tell us all about that.
Sure. So, like I said earlier, it's about my journey becoming disabled and processing that and coming to terms with it and really acknowledging the lessons that it has taught me. I currently just yesterday, actually the day before, started a Kickstarter campaign to help raise funds. I I could pursue traditional publishing, but that comes with a very small amount of royalties, and you lose the rights to your own material, which
Mhm.
I don't want to do.
Mhm.
So I'm raising funds to help cover the cost of editorial services, then getting the book published. I want to do it myself, just because I get more royalties, and then I also maintain the rights to my book, which I think is very, very important. So I have a Kickstarter campaign that just started. It's got you can help back the project for as little as $1. You don't have to go in and put 20, 40, 50, whatever into it. You can go and support a project for $1 and you can get early release. So anybody that does buy a tier that, donates a tier that comes with something, they'll get it before the general public does. So a whole month before. So if you want a signed paperback, if you want the ebook, etc., you would get it a month before everybody else. But it's just a good way to help back any project. There's some really great stuff on Kickstarter. If you're not familiar with it, it is a crowdfunding site that is just for creative projects.
Mhm.
So, new technology, games, publishing books, anything that film, anything theater, anything that is creative, that is specifically what this site is for. And it's also an all or nothing. So, if you say that you're going to back it for $10, it wouldn't get charged until the end of the project and only if it's successful. So it's not like GoFundMe where I can say, all right, this is my goal, and whoever contributes the funds would go to me no matter if I reach the goal. It has to be reached within a specific time. So up until January 5th is how long the campaign runs. I'm looking for $2,500, and that would help, like I said, with editorial costs because, writing a book isn't easy. And I want to put the best version of my book out as I can. Doing my advocacy work, gosh, I've been asked so many times over the last 8 years to write a book, and I've never just been in a good place to write it. And I finally have been but I want to put the best version out that I can. I don't want to disappoint people. And of course, like I said, that comes with editorial costs and things like that.
Beautiful. So if you've been listening to Pey's story and you would love to read this memoir, because I'm sure that it's to have really great information and helpful information for all of us to really go through that journey with her, then you can check out the Kickstarter link. I'm sure it's below or around here somewhere. So go help her out. And like she said, it could just be $1 if that's what you got. That's great. That every little bit helps. I love these crowdfunding things. So you said the campaign ends January 5th. So people go do it now because there's only a few weeks left. And hopefully,
sure. And you can also go to Kickstarter. If you don't see the link, you can go to Kickstarter and just search for My Body's Not Your Dartboard and it'll come up as well.
Nice. Yes, perfect. Well, thank you so much for coming on and talking about stuff that can be very, very personal for some people to want to share. But thank you for sharing so that we could take in some of the juicy bits that you've learned. You know, I love hearing other people's stories because I think that we all kind of heal a little bit if we can take some of it in and take some of the wisdom in that you have shared. Beautiful.
Appreciate you having me on your podcast. It's
been
great talking to you.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Pey. And thank you, listeners, for tuning in. This podcast is supported by Christina Smith Coaching as a service to get you to have more confidence and self-love. One way we do that is by bringing what we learn into our bodies by lighting up our senses. Some people call these types of exercises rituals. I think they're really alignments. Something we do each day to align with what we truly want rather than getting stuck in the default of trying to outrun what we don't. I bet you could use a little self-love ritual today, and there's a short quiz or survey to pick the best one for you. You can go to the link in the description to take the free quiz to get the self-love alignment that is right for you right now. You'll also get a download of 5 self-love rituals so you can switch it up and try one each day. Our little thank you for tuning into our podcast and into your own heart. Hey, one more thing. When we are all more confident and full of self-love, we can act more intentionally and mindfully. What would a world like that look like? I want to know. One way that you can help me with this vision is to subscribe, rate, and review our podcast wherever you listen to it. It helps more than you know, and it's just a few clicks to help me create a more beautiful world. And as always, remember to be gentle with your humanness.